going back to the quantity thing we were talking about, one of the things you said is when you go on the ice, no matter what you do, it's not going to hurt your skills progression. If you're going on the ice playing, like it's not going to hurt you to go on the ice and play, you know? And so maybe like another little nuanced conversation is when people talk about practicing bad habits, because that's a concern that people will always bring up, especially when we're talking young. A lot of people think, well, it's good to get like some instruction, which I agree, it's good to get some instruction, but because you don't want kids practicing bad habits. And it's like, where's kind of the line on the bad habits thing? Because for me, I don't see, if you're going out playing the game, I don't see that you're going to be getting any worse at what you're doing, especially when the younger you are. If anything, I feel like you're going to start to figure out better movement patterns by accident just from playing more. But a common thing people will say is what about, you might practice having bad habits or bad skating, get into bad skating patterns or whatever. So what kind of
I don't
thoughts
think
on
in
that?
young you're gonna get develop bad skating patterns when you're young, and that's not, you fix that stuff later. But like you could argue like, oh, bad habits if you play too much or too much of the cross ice or pond hockey and stuff, you can create bad habits like from positionally, or you're hanging on to a puck too much, or you're not passing, or you're not back checking hard, and you could say, okay, those are bad habits, which they would kind of are, but that's in an unstructured environment. When you get to the structured environment and a coach is giving you back check hard, move the puck, and there's a system somewhat in place, then those habits can be pulled in, right? But um, um, as far as like developing a terrible stride from being on the ice too much, well, not really, not when you're young. Not when you're young. I mean, it's just better because you're turning and doing all these things, right? I'd rather be out there having fun and doing, 128 tight turns because I'm playing and having fun. You're doing them,
Right.
right? You kind of figure things out.
Yeah. And I think,
You fix that. You can fix that stuff.
well, that's kind of my other question, is because some other people will be of the mindset that it's almost like they think that you can learn mechanics perfect off the hop. So it's like, well, if he gets instruction right off the bat, then he'll never get into a bad habit. And it's like, no, because
I would say just try it.
Yeah,
You
right?
do that for 2-3 years. Just do that.
Right. Because it's
do that.
It's too detailed.
No,
right?
do that. Like if you're like, that's what I would say. I'm being an ass here a bit, but I'm not. I'll give you a choice. Let your kid go out and play pond hockey or rent the ice with a bunch of buddies from 7 to 10 years old, or 7 to 11 years old. That's their skill development. Just go piss around as much as they want, or that you get that one, or you get private lesson every day or 4 days a week, 3 days a week, and it's strictly the mechanics piece. Like if someone just telling you what to do, and pick one, and then I know which one I'm taking.
Well, and the other part too is something I've noticed with a lot of skills coaches, and if I'm being totally honest, there's very few skills coaches that I've seen, particularly with skating, that can really explain mechanics well. So, for example, if I'm trying to teach a kid how to skate properly, like the first thing people say always, this is what I use with kids on the treadmill when I'm trying to teach them. The first movement that everyone will say is bend your knees, right? But if you bend your knees first, you're not in a good skating posture, because the first movement is actually a hip hinge. You do a hip hinge and then you bend your knees. But a lot of instructors don't know that. So if you're on the ice when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, even if instruction would be better, a lot of instructors don't even know how to explain the body mechanics properly, let alone you being able to execute the body mechanics properly as a kid. Like if I say to an 8-year-old, hey, hinge your hips or stick your butt out, they don't know the movement. They don't get it. So it's like for the first 2 years of their skating, they have wood legs. They don't know how to bend properly. They don't know how to sit into the saddle properly. They don't know.
Well, but there's the key, which you've done right there, is you've described the biggest element when it comes to skill development or coaching. It's what is the problem. That's what it is. So if you look at someone that is that stiff leg or leaning forward too much, like their chest is over their toes and they got the wide legs or whatever it is, it's like, okay, bending your knees is not the first cue that would you would get. It would be to identify to the kid, and they saying, okay, here, son, look for a second. Maybe it's standing still. Push on his head, he's going to fall. It's like, okay, why is that happening? Because you're unbalanced. So what you have to do, number one, to get any power, to get any agility, to get anything, is you got to put yourself in an athletic position where you're balanced. Because if you have balance, you can have power in everything that you do, right? A boxer doesn't stand in an awkward position. You never get any power out of his punch, right? So it's the same thing as hockey. It's that first thing you have to identify. So once you identify, okay, here's where you're going to get your this is your athletic position, or this is your hockey stance, and now you're in good position. Right now, you can kind of explain like the first place where you need to go to get that is okay. So let's say you take that skater, you're leaning forward, your legs are straight or whatever. It's like, okay, let's straighten you out and let's bend first at the waist, at the hips, and then everything kind of folds together. But if you try to do knees first, then your your hips come forward and it doesn't make sense. So, anyways, the key is identifying what problems are before you can start teaching anything. And not everybody's the same,
Hmm.
right?
And that's the magic of being a good teacher, being a good skills coach. If you and a lot of them, ones that I see frequently, they cannot address the actual issue that a kid is having. So if you're working on an inside edge drill and the coach just keeps saying get lower, it's like you're not explaining to me how to get lower or why I'm not getting low
Well, how
enough,
would some
right?
kids get lower? They would get their
They're
instead
just
of their
chest forward,
that's right,
right? So
tip
that's
their head, whatever.
and
That's lower.
exactly.
Yeah,
So and then the coach would be like, "No, like you're keep your chest up, but you need to get lower."
yeah.
And then the kid's like, "Okay, how? I don't know how to do that." So if the trainer can't explain that to you, then you're not going to be getting better anyways. So back to my original point, even if the instruction was better at a younger age, a lot of instructors can't even teach the teaching points because they don't know body mechanics. Because a lot of skills coaches are someone that maybe used to play or whatever, but they're not versed in biomechanics or how any of your body moves, so it's like you're going to them for skating mechanics, but they don't know body mechanics, so how can they appropriately teach skating mechanics outside of just doing drills that they find or that they see, you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah. Well, I would go back that I would challenge people. And I'm like, I know most people are not going to take this challenge, but I would ask yourself, like, privately by yourself, but ask yourself, like, ask this question: if I got to make a decision here, I've got to let my kid go and go have fun, go find ice, go shoot pucks, do everything kind of without an instructor. If I'm going to make one choice, or the other one is everything with an instructor, which one would you choose? And that's kind of I would lean towards more towards one. Like, so I'm not saying tell your kid just to only have fun till he's 12, never have an instructor or that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you're looking at the development side is if you were choosing one, yeah, if you were choosing one, like you're only allowed to pick one, I would say go get 1,000 million reps having fun with your buddies rather than every single time going out with a coach that's telling you how to do everything and instructionally.
Hmm.